Good morning and welcome to BBOC Live presented by BetMGM. It's 10:35 a.m. Eastern, and this is the Week 9 college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me as always are my fellow BBOC co-hosts, Collin Wilson and the one and only Mr. Brett McMurphy. We have a lot to get to today. We'll talk our three best bets as always. We'll talk two marquee matchups. And we will not have Mr. Darren Ravel taking a day off, and after he was talking about always working, but we will have Mike Calabrese with his group of 5 best bet. I do want to remind everyone to make sure that you download the award-winning Action Network app. If you haven't already, you can find all of our bets there in addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond. Also, BBOC is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 paid back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Do appreciate everyone's patience. Had a couple technical glitches for a few minutes, and I know, Collin, your mom was getting impatient waiting in the stream.
Shout out to Mom. The text that came through 5 minutes ago. There's 1,000 of us waiting for you. I'm like, I don't think they're waiting for me, but probably you and Brett. But thanks, Mom. Thank you. Shout out to Mom.
Well, I'm glad that she's here. Welcome, Mrs. Wilson, and let's take a quick look at the leaderboard. I think everyone was waiting for McMurphy's fades, Brett's fades after last week with Brett, you had a reverse sweep. I had a clean sweep. Collin, at least you got us into the green. Brett, have you made any changes you want to comment on? Changed your underwear? You feeling the mojo this week?
You know, it's funny, Stuck. I went 0-3, and so now I actually know how you felt when you put diesel fuel in your rent-a-car. This week, though, I guarantee I will be better than last week. I have more intel than Connor Stallion, so I'm ready to go.
I think Brett and I are here, Stuck, so that you can tell us where the Minnesota referees and the Service Academy pick sixes are going to be this week. If you could help us out with that, that is what we want this week.
I will do my best. Someone on the show has to hit 64%, so hopefully I can keep it going. But after last year, we all hit 60%. I have full confidence the guys will close out the year strong. So let's get things started with our best bets. Our first of the day, I'll kick things off. I'm going to go with Purdue, boiler up, catching points at Nebraska. I think this is a good buy, low point on Purdue. Coming off the bye, their record is a little misleading. They've been a bit unlucky in a number of metrics, had some misleading final scores. They've also had one of the 10 hardest schedules in the country. Meanwhile, Nebraska's eked out a few wins with a schedule that ranks around national average. But the most important thing here is the Nebraska injuries. I mean, before last week, they already lost 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers. Last week, they lose 3 starting offensive linemen who won't play. They lose their leading receiver, Billy Kemp. I mean, it is just a bad situation. Nebraska head coach Matt Rule said he's never seen an injury situation like this. You lose 3 offensive linemen at once. Just from a continuity perspective, 1 week later, that's going to be a tough ask. Purdue can just load the box here, and Nebraska won't be able to take advantage of their slow-footed secondary. And on the other side of the ball, Nebraska's defense has been very good this year, but their run defense is much better than their pass defense. Run defense doesn't really matter against Purdue because they just want to drop back with Hudson Card and throw it. So I think Purdue should be a small favorite here. I think they win this game. Injuries just too much for Corn. So give me Purdue, boiler up. Collin, where you headed for your first best bet?
Everybody with a Nebraska win total under 6 is hoping you cash this bet. I'm going to move to Kansas State, the hottest team in college football right now, since they went off and got Avery Johnson to split time at the quarterback position with Will Howard. I'm going to take the first half in Kansas State -10 because we talked about this on the podcast. Houston is coming off 3 emotional games. Texas Tech, where Donovan Smith used to play, plus, the ties Dana Holgorsen has there. Then West Virginia, where Dana Holgorsen used to be employed. And then against Texas last week in a heartbreaking loss by a single possession. Now you're going up to Kansas State in a Jefferson Pilot time slot early in the morning. And when you look at these two teams and how they score in the first half, Houston is about even when you go into scoring differential in the first half. Kansas State is +10. Get Texas on deck for Kansas State next week, biggest game in the Big 12 next week. And I just think that, Kansas State could kind of peel off in the second half and not be as explosive or look to blow out Houston because of what's coming up next week. But it's all right there in the numbers. Kansas State's rush explosives and finishing drives are going to dominate this game. Kansas State's top 25 in rush explosives. Houston's 89th in defending that, and they're 119th in defensive finishing drives, which means if Kansas State gets into scoring position, we're probably going to get a touchdown. So give me Kansas State -10 in the first half.
Yeah, hopefully you get an old Dana special after a couple spirited efforts from Houston. Came so close to taking Texas down last week. So you hope for one of those games where Dana's pulling his hair out and his team comes out lackadaisical and they're down 21-0, as we saw earlier this year against Rice in the first quarter. Brett, you are, I believe, you're staying in the Sunflower State. I could be making that up. I think Kansas is the Sunflower State. Where you headed for your first best bet?
Yeah. We do not compare our plays before we come on the show. I do have Kansas State, but I have Kansas State for the game -20. Like Collin mentioned a couple weeks ago, Houston faced West Virginia, Holgerson's old stomping ground. The game against Texas hadn't played in Houston in 20 years and won't play in Houston for another 300 years. So that was a monster game. Both games go down to the wire. The Cougars, like Collin said, they're running on fumes. But besides the emotional issues, remember, this is Houston's first year playing in a Power 5 conference since moving up from the American. This is their fourth straight Big 12 opponent. They simply don't have the quality depth yet. And I think that shows today. On the other side, they face a Kansas State team, like Collin mentioned. Freshman quarterback Avery Johnson has been a spark. What has Kansas State done at home this year? Every game, they've topped 40 points. I think Kansas State will roll a worn-out Cougs team and in their attempt to try to get back and defend their Big 12 championship.
Yeah, you mentioned Kansas State and their home prowess there in the Little Apple. Houston, this has got to feel like they're going to a different country. They haven't left the state of Texas all year, and they actually won't again until I believe their season finale when they travel to the bounce house at UCF. So good luck to both of you gentlemen rolling with the Wildcats. All right, let's move on to our first marquee matchup of the day. It's a big one in the Pac-12. It's essentially an elimination game in many aspects for Pac-12 implications, college football playoff. You have some Heisman implications with Bo Nix. Oregon took some money on the open. I believe they're sitting. I think they're still, are they still 6.5? I don't think it's moved off that. 6.5 point favorites. Yep. Under a touchdown here. I think this is a good matchup for Oregon, but I have a rule of thumb, a couple of rules of thumbs when betting college football. Most of them involve service academies, but one of them involves never fading Utah at home, or rarely ever doing it. And you have two competing forces here. What is going to happen? Nix has been better on the road, but there's still the ghost of road Bo Nix. And throughout his career, he's performed so much better at home. Well, now he's going in to a place full of voodoo with one of the best home field advantages in all of college football. Do those ghosts come back out? I want no part of this game. I think Oregon should find a way to win. I think that they match up pretty well with Utah and then just have more talent ultimately. But I'm not going against Whittingham as a dog. I'm not going against the Rice-Eccles voodoo. This is a pass for me. Collin, where you headed?
I'm going to take Utah in this game. And, the whole narrative of you can't come to Rice-Eccles and lay this many points. I think this game 3, it's going to be a grudge match. There are avenues for both to move the ball and score points, but both of these defenses are really good in defensive finishing drives, red zone activity. I expect scoring to be pretty limited, and I like the under 47 here. But at the same time, use just too many points for Utah. Bo Nix is going to have to hit short passes in standard downs. Standard downs means 1st and 10, 2nd and 7, 3rd and 4. They're going to have to hit short passes. That's where you can attack that Utah defense because they're just too good at shutting down inside-outside zone with that front 7. So look for Oregon to be a little bit creative about what they do with the passing game with Bo Nix. I don't expect a lot of deep shots out of Oregon, but they're going to be successful moving the ball, throwing. And then on the Utah side, you can't throw stats. If anybody's throwing stats out on this Utah offense, just throw them away, because this team has morphed from week to week to week. We have defensive back Sione Vaki, who has become the all-star of the team. He's the true dual threat in this entire country. We have a big farmer at quarterback that's dominating the Heisman Trophy quarterback from last week. I mean, you just can't even keep up with how great this Utah offense is, what they're turning into. So it's a grudge match. I think it comes down to the very end, and Oregon wins by a field goal. So give me the points with Utah.
Brett, you on board?
Yeah, I am. A lot of the things that you guys mentioned. Also, Utah 7-1 their last 8 against the spread at home. They've won 29 of their last 30 games at home outright. Look, Bryson Barnes, Collin mentioned, he's a pig farmer. I grew up in Oklahoma. I knew some pig farmers. None of them could play quarterback like Bryson. And this has nothing to do with the handicap, but I love this note from Kyle Whittingham. He told me yes at media days. Since July 1st, 2008, so Stuckey, you were probably in kindergarten then, he has started working out. He has worked out every single day since then. That's 15 years, almost 5,600 days. With that kind of commitment, you got to go with the Utes.
Yeah, Whittingham, for what it's worth, 25-13 against the spread as an underdog of 4.5 points or more. And yeah, I like doing the show with you guys because you make me feel young. Usually I feel old in my life. All right, let's move on to our second best bets of the day. I'll kick things off in the Copper State. I could be making up all these state names. Who comes up with these state names, by the way? Is there like an official body? I don't know how they come up with them, but I think Arizona's the Copper State. But I'm going with Arizona. This team is good. Like you break down all the advanced metrics of the team, which should have one loss, and they've had one of the hardest schedules in the country. They should have won at Mississippi State without turnover luck. They lost in overtime. They should have won at USC. I think they lost in double overtime. Go for 2. Come on, Jed Fish. But Fish is doing a tremendous job down there. Noah Fafita, he's the truth. I mean, this guy, ranked top 10 in completion percentage, QBR. He's made 3 starts as a freshman, all against top 20 teams. This offense is super balanced, and they can move it on the ground, through the air. I think they can really attack this Oregon State secondary. And the other side of the ball, something that a lot of people are not talking about is the Arizona defense. What are they, top 20 stuff rate, line yards? They've played the run extremely well. That's Oregon State's bread and butter. Look, I have an Oregon State Pac-12 future. I think it goes up in flames tonight. Bear down. Let's go Arizona. Collin, where you headed?
Best against the spread record in all of FBS is Arizona at 6-1. I'm going to stay in the Pac-12. I'm going to go to Washington minus 14.5 in the first half against Stanford. Listen, if there's a team you want to have a get healthy game against, it's going to be Stanford's defense. This is such a good situational spot for the Huskies here. No offensive touchdowns against Arizona State last week. They have overlooked to USC next week. So this Stanford game is uber important for Kalen DeBoer and Michael Penix to get back up on that horse, put him in the front of the Heisman Trophy. I mean, they need the stats. They need the touchdowns. They got to get that offense back in rhythm. Not a single touchdown last week is amazing. The scoring differential by half on these two teams is what really made this play a first half instead of a full game. And that is Washington is 3rd in FBS in scoring differential, plus 16.2 in the first half. Stanford is 132nd in the nation. That's second to last, minus 13.2 in scoring differential. This is, and I think that whole second half scoring differential is because of that Colorado game, but Stanford is just atrocious. And they're dead last in FBS defensively and finishing drives, which means every time Washington gets past the 40, they're going to get a touchdown. So I'm going to take the first half here with the Huskies minus 14.5.
Collin rolling with the Purple Rain. Brett, you're also going with a top 10 favorite here. What do you got?
Yeah, Texas and BYU. 2 weeks ago, I played against BYU on the road at TCU and won. By the way, that may have been my last winning selection on this show. But anyway, the same philosophy is in play today. BYU on the road is not a pretty sight. The Cougars were throttled at Kansas and at TCU. They've only been able to win at Arkansas, but hey, Mississippi State showed anyone can do that. BYU is a very misleading 5-2. They probably should be, 3-4. As far as Texas, yes, I'm aware of the horns without quarterback Quinn Ewers. No Ewers, no problem. Dual threat quarterback Malik Murphy is all right. Texas is one of only 4 schools that has scored at least 30 points this year. Pair that with the Big 12's top rush defense, And second overall best defense, Horns score a lot. BYU can't score. Texas -20.
Yeah, this BYU team I like this one. It's a complete fraud. I mean, if you dig into their wins, they've been completely fraudulent. Just dig into those box scores. The team that I'm looking to fade specifically next week at West Virginia, but don't mind fading them here. Malik Murphy, potential tryout for the transfer portal, but I think Texas comes out with a focused effort after last week's scare, and this BYU team just isn't very good. By the way, you mentioned Kent. You mentioned Arkansas being the only team to lose to BYU at home. Collin, I got a trivia question for you. Kent State has one FBS cover on the year. Who did it come against?
An Arkansas team that can't run the ball.
At Arkansas. Kent State's only cover on the road in SEC play. All right, let's take a
Dan Enos. Shout out to Dan Enos. Thank you.
Well, enjoy your bye week. There's no we'll be on your hogs next week. That could be a best bet on the show. But let's take a break in the action and throw it to fellow BBOC co-host Mike Calabrese for his group of 5 bet of the day.
Thanks, Duck. For my best bet here in G5 land for week number 9, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to go with UConn, who's more or less an honorary G5 team in the independent ranks. They're traveling to Chestnut Hill to take on BC, and BC is a great play in this spot. They're laying 14 against a UConn team that it's white flag season. Their car is broken down on the side of the road. They got the white shirt in the window. This thing is over for Jim Mora and company. They're 1-6 on the season, and now they're staring down some road trips to Tennessee, James Madison, here against Boston College. A BC team, by the way, that is surging. They're 4-3 on the season. They're now projected by our Brett McMurphy to go to the Duke Mayo Bowl, and they've been great since mid-September. You know, they nearly upset Florida State. They've won 3 in a row, and last week against Georgia Tech, their quarterback, Thomas Castellanos, was absolutely on fire. 255 yards passing, 2 TDs. Another 128 on the ground, 2 more TDs. The guy is an absolute problem, and it's the reason why BC leads the entire country in explosiveness on the ground. They're up against a UConn defense, cannot stop the run. 113th in success rate there. And when there's an opportunity for UConn to maybe get a backdoor cover, they're going to have to put the ball in orbit, and Taquan Roberson has been awful. His QBR this year has been so low. He's got 4 games under 33 in the QBR department. So I think this is an absolute hammer play on BC. The only reason I think this number is as close as it is because Jeff Hafley hasn't been a great home favorite, just 4-7 in his career in Chestnut Hill. But I think in this spot, BC is surging, so I'll go ahead and lay the 14. I also like the alternate line up to BC laying 20.5. All right, back to you guys.
All right, thanks, Mike, who's rolling with Boston College. How about that win total? Has some life. Thought that was dead. Almost buried it. We'll see if BC can avoid. I wouldn't be shocked if they lost outright, but I do like the spot, and they should roll against a very bad UConn team that's been extremely disappointing after some progress made last year. But let's get to our second marquee game of the day. Let's head to the SEC, the big game mid-afternoon, the world's largest cocktail party in Jacksonville, Florida, between Georgia and Florida. Georgia, 14.5 point favorite here, a little over 2 touchdowns. I like Florida here. Look, this Georgia team, I assumed they were going to come out at night in prime time after a bad effort against an undefeated Kentucky team. That's the first time we've seen them come out with a spirited effort from the jump. Every time else, home against South Carolina, at Auburn. This team just comes out slow. There's just a sense of complacency around this team with one of the easiest schedules in the country. I have their schedule ranked outside the top 100. And yet, if you remove that Kentucky game, they have been tied 24-24 after the first quarter. I expect, until I see otherwise, I expect another slow start. I also think this Florida team can have some success running the ball a little bit. I think ETN can break some big runs, but the short passing attack, that's how you can attack this Georgia team. I think they're going to go heavy 12 personnel, short passes, every once in a while, take a shot to Pearsall deep, get Wilson involved in the run game. Mertz can use his legs a little bit to extend drives, but I think you get Boardingham, 2 tight ends in there, and they can move the ball a little bit against a Georgia team that's getting no pressure whatsoever, and they played absolutely nobody. Oh, and by the way, Brock Bowers isn't there. on offense. I think Austin Armstrong, the Florida defensive coordinator, has come out with a super aggressive game plan. And look, Carson Beck's been good, but I mean, he's faced nothing but cupcake states all year. They're going to hit some explosive plays, but I think he's going to make a mistake, which he's done in the past 3 games. I think this is just too many points without Bowers. Give me Florida and old Sunbelt Billy, who I believe is 17-4 against the spread as an underdog. He'll get us that back door if we need it. Collin, what do you see here?
Over. I love the over in this game with Brock Bowers not there for Georgia. That means they're going to go from a 12 personnel down to 11 personnel. That's one less tight end. That's going to be more explosives from the wideouts. And I think you have to see who the offensive coordinator is. It's Mike Bobo. And what Mike Bobo does in an offense that he gets to call and not Todd Monken's old offense, it's going to be a lot of play action pass and 4 verticals to going down the field. And the person that takes Brock Bowers' place is Dominic Lovett. He was one of the most explosive slot receivers last year for Missouri, averaging 2.9 yards per route run. That is extremely explosive. And now he is in the spotlight getting those routes. There's just going to be more targets for everybody else in that passing game. And Carson Beck, the numbers have been fine so far. He's got a beautiful ball after over 20 yards. So I expect Georgia to score and score often here. And as for Florida, Graham Mertz is going to be able to move the ball too, although not as explosive. He's got one of the shortest average depth of targets of any quarterback in FBS football, but that is going to allow Florida to methodically move down the field. And when you're talking about overs and you've got the head coach of Florida, he would try to score if he's up by 100, down by 100, running tempo with 1 minute left. I would not take an under with Florida's head coach. So give me the over here. I'm looking for a lot of explosives and tempo.
Brett, what do you got here?
I love how Collin wouldn't say his name. Yeah, Stuck, I agree with you. I like Florida. Georgia hasn't played anyone. They've been overvalued and underwhelming this season. The Dogs are only 1-5-1 against the spread and have exactly 1 win against a team with a winning record so far. And besides Georgia's struggles, dating back to last year, teams ranked number 1 are only 2-11-1 when facing unranked teams. As far as the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, first time Georgia has been more than a 2-touchdown favorite in 3 consecutive years. And Florida has never pulled off an upset when they're that big of an underdog. 0-17 all time, but they don't need to win. They just need to keep it within 2 scores. As you said, Stuck, Billy Napier, I'll say his name, Billy Napier, is a wizard as an underdog. Give me the Gators, 14 plus 14.5.
Old Sun Belt Billy. All right, good stuff there. Can't wait for that game. Let's take another break and talk a little round robin parlay. Goal is to try to hit 1 or 2 of these a year. Collin, you feeling good about this? Will it lead us off?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start off with Arkansas State. The rush of pass explosives are both in the top 25 going up against a ULM defense that is horrible in controlling explosives. Let's start off with the Red Wolves of Arkansas State.
Well, if you can't get Arkansas on the show, I guess Arkansas State would be the next best thing. I'm going to throw in Purdue. Talked about this earlier in the show. I think they win.
Yeah, I mean, we already mentioned Arizona. Let's go to Arizona State there in Tempe. I mean, look what they did. Their defense did to Washington last week. They held them to a field goal, and then Washington got a pick 6, and then another field goal. I am a buyer of the Sun Devils down the stretch. They can't play in a bowl game, so Kenny Dillingham's going to have them up for all the games remaining on the schedule.
Yeah, defensive coordinator there, Brian Ward, really familiar with Cam Ward. They can bring a ton of pressure. Their secondary has been really good, and that's all Washington State wants to do. Forks up. Let's stay in Arizona and go with Arizona. Everything's coming up Arizona lately, although maybe Seeger ended that run last night. Yeah, I talked about this earlier, like Arizona. Let's pair up the 2 Arizona Pac-12 teams. Close us out here.
Yeah, let's go with Georgia Tech. The Yellow Jackets are coming off a bye here. They're going to be fresh. They're taking on a North Carolina team that had whatever national title hopes and maybe ACC hopes get dashed last week and a brutal loss to Virginia. If you look at North Carolina's history, they lose games in bunches over the years, including this game last year against Georgia Tech. So look for the Yellow Jackets to pull it off.
Past 2 years, I believe, North Carolina massive favorites against Georgia Tech and lost both outright. Yeah, there's a good chance that this North Carolina team doesn't get off the bus, and it's tough laying a big number with them with that defense, which is not very good. All right, good stuff there with the round robin. We got Arkansas State, both Arizona Pac-12 schools, Purdue and Georgia Tech. Before we get out of here, we have one final test. That's our final best bet. I'll kick things off. I'm going to go in my backyard. I'm going with Kentucky. catching over a field goal at home. I think this is a great spot off the bye. He got healthier, rested up. I'm hearing good things about Devin Leary and his mechanical issue. They worked on the offense during the bye. I also think this is a good matchup. They can stop the run, and that leaves it up to Joe Milton. I don't trust him on the road. And by the way, this Tennessee three-headed monster in the backfield, they've been unbelievable. I think averaging close to 6 yards per carry. But there are 2 road games against Florida and Alabama. They averaged 3.7 yards per carry. They got completely shut down, and Milton couldn't do anything. I think the same thing happens here. Tennessee's run defense has also been good, but they've given up a little bit too many explosives. I think Ray Davis hits a couple explosives. I think the Kentucky offense comes out, looks a little crisper. They've had drop issues. Leary's had accuracy issues, but I think it looks different today. Kentucky off a bye. Tennessee, second straight SEC road game. Had A&M before that. This team's banged up, exhausted. I think this is a good spot. Let's go Cats. Collin, I know originally you had Tennessee. You were going to go Tennessee. You were afraid to go head-to-head, so where are you going?
Yeah, I peeled off that this morning. I'm going to go to Southern Miss. If you can drop down and get a chance to take a dumpster fire team like Southern Miss, I think you got to do it. Southern Miss is 1-6 this year. Their only wins against Alcorn State, but they're having hopefully going to be a little bit rejuvenated today. Will Hall has changed everything. He's actually handed the play calling off himself to his running back and offensive line coach, which is what needs to happen, because with Frank Gore on your team, you need to line him up under center, let him run the Wildcat. There's been a lot of success with that, right? So, but it's App State. App State is horrendous. They've lost 3 of their last 4. They had a Wyoming bad beat, and they've just not recovered since then against Coastal. They lost to Old Dominion last week, and then the one win they've had in the last month was against ULM because of a 54-yard field goal that was kicked last second. They didn't even get close to covering the 14. So their only victories this season are against Gardner-Webb, East Carolina, and ULM. I mean, App State has completely fallen off the map, and most of it is because of their run defense. 119th is the rank in these categories. Defensive rushing success rate, 119th. Rushing explosives allowed, 119th. Broken tackles allowed, 119th. Southern Miss is going to be able to run on this team, and they've completely changed everything, and the running back coach is calling Frank Gore. Let's do it. Let's lay it, and let's go.
Yeah, Wildcat with Gore today. Let him run it 35 times because, that run defense is porous, to say the least. Brett, you usually close out with a West Coast over. Not this week, but you are still headed out west. What do you got?
Yeah, for our folks, it'll be up late tonight. UNLV at Fresno State, one of the final games on today's schedule with a 10:30 p.m. Eastern time kick. When kickoff finally arrives tonight, Fresno State quarterback Mikey Keene will be a game time decision, but I'm told to expect him back in the starting lineup. That's big for the Bulldogs. He's been out since suffering an ankle injury in early October. Both teams have identical 6-1 records, but they are very, very different. UNLV became bowl eligible last week for the first time in 10 years. How did the Rebels get bowl eligible? Well, let's see. They beat Bryant, not Bear, but the school, although they probably have the same power rating. Vanderbilt, UTEP, Hawaii, Nevada, and Colorado State. None of those teams have a winning record. The best win of that group was last week's last-second win over a drained Colorado State team coming off a miracle Hail Mary win. UNLV will still be celebrating getting bowl eligible, while Fresno State is coming off a bye with Mikey Keene back at quarterback, trying to stay in running for the Mountain West title game. Bulldogs big, lay the 9.5.
Yeah, I heard Mikey Keene is also supposed to play. I also heard Riley Leonard potentially likely to play, but that should be a game time decision, and we'll see how he looks. But thank you, as always, to Brett and Collin for joining me. Thanks to our producers in the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Do want to remind everyone, BBOC is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 paid back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Also, one final reminder, make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app. If you haven't already, you can find all of our bets there. In addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond, we'll have a recap episode that'll be out by Monday morning. Make sure you don't forget about the voicemail, 959-BAD-BEAT. Come call in, scream, yell, cry, whatever you need to do to let it out. We'll play the best of those, hand out some prizes for Caller of the Week. BBOC, wherever you listen to podcasts, Group of Five Guys on Wednesday. New BCS Tuesday, live on YouTube, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Thursday, Colin will be back with the week 10. I can't believe it's gonna be week 10 already. Week 10 college
Action
football
time.
betting preview. Yep. And we will be back next week, same time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Thanks again for tuning in. Good luck on all of your wagers today. Cheers.